It's nearly 9 p.m. now Eastern Time, and the polls are about to close in 14 more states, including Colorado, Kansas, Louisiana, and Wisconsin.
We have just had one slight change to a call from a state in which the polls are already closed. The Connecticut governor's race, it had been too early to call. Connecticut governor is now too close to call. And again, this is the rematch. Do you honestly think
there's somebody out there remarking their card? I went, oh, Mike, did you just happen? We went from too close to too early. Oh, my God, give me a beer.
Well, but if you were thinking that Connecticut governor was going to be a blowout,
I know.
It was just early, come on.
No, we're very careful about these things, but I wonder if the average
He's
viewer...
not going to give it to you, Rachel.
No, okay, you're right. It's amazing news, and I tell you, my life has changed.
If you are a civics dork, this is like the litmus test of dorkitude. If you are a big enough dork, too close versus too early, it's like the difference between day and night.
This has got to be one of those editorial cartoons. Did you hear what she said?
Right.
Too early.
Exactly.
Anyway, you're on.
Thank you.
Yes.
At the top of the hour, in 20 seconds, polls in 14 different states are going to be closing. We've got closed Senate races and also closed governor's races here. Keep in mind that we're still waiting on Senate results in North Carolina, New Hampshire, Virginia, and Georgia. We're still waiting on governor's results in Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maine, Connecticut, and Georgia. Those are all places where the polls have already closed, but we don't yet have conclusive results. In terms of polls closing, though, at 9 o'clock, let's start with the Senate races, and then we'll do the governors thereafter. In the Senate races, this is a Republican pickup. This is the Tim Johnson Senate seat in South Dakota. Tim Johnson, the retiring Democratic senator. This will now be, according to NBC News projections, this will be a seat held by Mike Rounds, the Republican candidate in the South Dakota Senate race. An interesting three-way race there. In the Kansas Senate race, incumbent Republican Pat Roberts facing off against an independent named Greg Orman. This one is too close to call. Just 9% of the vote in thus far in Kansas. In Colorado, the Senate race where Mark Udall, the Democratic incumbent, is trying to hold on to his seat. He's facing off against Republican Congressman Cory Gardner. This one is too early to call in Colorado. In the Louisiana Senate race, it's another Democratic incumbent, Mary Landrieu, facing off against Republican Bill Cassidy. This one, according to NBC News projections, is also too early to call. In Michigan, the Senate race there is a call. Projected winner, according to NBC News, is Gary Peters. That's the Democratic seat there. Carl Levin is retiring as the Democratic incumbent. It's an open seat. It will be held by the Democratic Party. In the Minnesota Senate race, incumbent Democrat Al Franken holding on to his seat, according to NBC News projections. In the Texas Senate race, do we have the Texas Senate race? Yes, we do. Texas incumbent Republican Senator John Cornyn is projected to hold on to his seat in Texas. In Nebraska, NBC News is also projecting the new Republican senator from Nebraska will be Ben Sasse. He's the projected winner there. In Wyoming, the Republican incumbent senator there, Mike Enzi, has held on to his seat after a would-be primary challenge from Liz Cheney fizzled out. Mike Enzi winning in Wyoming to hold on to his seat. And in New Mexico, in the Senate race there, this is Tom Udall, the Democratic incumbent, facing off against a Republican challenger named Alan Way. This one is too early to call. We do have a call now in New Hampshire. We have been waiting on this one. NBC News can now project that the New Hampshire Senate race has been held by the incumbent Democrat, Jeanne Shaheen, defeating Scott Brown, who moved from Massachusetts to face her. Scott, let me get your reaction to that one.
Well, Rachel, everybody has their own way of looking at how this election can turn out when it's all over in January 6th. I think there's a route. It may be a difficult route. It may be it's plausible. In fact, based upon the numbers, it is plausible. She just won. That's the first step. The next step is to win, if the Democrats want to control the Senate next time. Win in North Carolina. That's when Hagan has to hang on there and win. Then pick up Kansas because of the independent candidate who will go with the Democrats if it's decisive, we're told. Then win in Alaska, which is always hard to poll. And then go out and win the final races. Michelle Nunn has to nail it down January 6th. It is doable. In fact, it's one was within the margin of error in all those cases. So it's not a pipe dream. It is going to be tricky. They have to win all 5. Yeah. There's one alternative. Instead of winning in Alaska, they could win possibly in either Colorado or Iowa, but they're difficult, more difficult. It is doable tonight. If you're watching, hoping, if you're a progressive or a Democrat, just like a good fight, there is a possibility, a possible route for the Democrats to hold on tonight in terms after all this talk.
But we do have a lot more information than we already have. Kansas, too close to call. Colorado, too early to call with that win in New Hampshire. I should also say that Scott Brown just made history. He is now the first person in American history to have lost Senate races to 2 different women. So Scott Brown,
who's next?
Feminist hero.
Maine, and take on Susan Collins in 6 years. He'll go to Maine.
We've got some news in terms of governor's races. I believe, do we have governor's boards now in terms of polls that just closed at 9 p.m.? The Wisconsin governor's race. So this, of course, is a very closely watched race. Scott Walker, the embattled Republican incumbent, facing off against Democrat Mary Burke. NBC News is characterizing this as too close to call in Wisconsin. In the Kansas governor's race, the heart-right Republican, proud conservative governor there, Sam Brownback, in a race against a Democrat named Paul Davis. This one just 9% of the vote in. This is too close to call in the deep red state of Kansas. In the Colorado governor's race, the Democratic incumbent there is John Hickenlooper. His opponent is former Republican Congressman Bob Beaupre. This one is too early to call in Colorado. In Michigan, the governor's race, about 11% in there. The Republican incumbent there is Rick Snyder. He's facing off against Democratic challenger Mark Schauer. This one is too early to call in Michigan. In Texas, there is a call. The new Texas Republican governor will be Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott defeating Democratic national household name Wendy Davis to keep the Texas governorship in Republican hands, according to NBC News projections. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, also projected by NBC News to be holding on to his seat in the state of New York. In the Minnesota governor's race, NBC News can project that Democratic incumbent Mark Dayton will also hold on to that governorship. In the South Dakota governor's race, the projected winner is the incumbent Republican Dennis Daugaard. In Wyoming, the governor's race in Wyoming, the projected winner is the incumbent Republican Matt Mead. In Arizona, this has been an interesting race to watch. Jan Brewer in Arizona, very high-profile Republican governor there, is stepping down. Doug Ducey wants to replace her as a Republican. Fred Duvall, the Democrat, vying for that seat in Arizona. It is too early to call. In New Mexico, Republican incumbent Susana Martinez facing a Democratic challenge from Gary King. That one's also too early to call. And in the great state of Nebraska, the governor's race has just 6% in. That's too early to call between Republican Pete Ricketts and Democrat Chuck Hasselbrook. That is a red state, obviously, but that is an open governor's seat. In the Florida governor's race, now these are a few governor's races where the polls already closed before the top of the hour, but we're still watching these races. Look at this, 95% of the vote in the Florida governor's race. You can see just about 100,000 votes, 125,000 votes between Rick Scott, the Republican incumbent, and Charlie Crist, the Democrat. With 95% in, this is not being called. This is too close to call, according to NBC News projections for Florida governor. The Illinois governor's race, this one also too close to call at this point. Pat Quinn, the incumbent Democrat, I think it's fair to call him an embattled incumbent Democrat, facing off against businessman Republican Bruce Rauner. This one, less than 30,000 votes between them, under 10% of the vote in. The Massachusetts governor's race, Martha Coakley, the Democrat, and Charlie Baker, the Republican. This one is too close to call. Less than 1 in 5 votes are in the Bay State thus far. In Maine, this has been a great one to watch. Paul LePage and Elliott Cutler were both in this race in 2010 when Paul LePage took office in Maine as the Republican governor with far short of the majority, anything close to a majority vote, because it was a three-way race. It's another three-way race now in Maine. No call there yet from NBC News. In the Connecticut governor's race, Dan Malloy and Tom Foley, they're having a rematch from their 2010 race. This one is too close to call. In terms of governor's races, the only other one we're watching right now that we've got information on is this Georgia governor's race. Nathan Deal, the Republican incumbent, against Jason Carter, the Democratic challenger. This one is too early to call. I want to go to Steve Kornacki right now in terms of what we know in the Florida governor's race. It's amazing. We've got 96% of the vote in right now, but this is still too close to call. What's going on, Steve?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you a collective flashback to 2000 now. You remember how late that night was in Florida. You remember all those South Florida county names that we all got so familiar with in 2000. So where it stands right now is Charlie Crist is looking at a gap of a little over 125,000 votes. That's what he's got to make up. Now let's go inside Florida and take a look. And here you go. It's these big three. This is the crown jewel of Democratic politics in Florida. Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade County. These are massive counties, massive Democratic vote-producing counties. Let's look inside and see what's happening there, if I can get that off the screen. So let's take a look at Broward, for instance, right here in the middle. And you can see right now, obviously, Charlie Crist doing very well very well right now. This number you're seeing, this says 21% is in. This suggests there's a huge amount of vote that's still out there. It's actually not the case. There's been a ton of absentee ballots that have come in, that have been counted. It doesn't affect the percentage of precincts that are reporting. So this is actually a little bit misleading when you look at that. The total in Broward, the total vote that came in the last time around. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here because I got it. The total number of votes were about 415,000 in Broward County the last time there was an election. So as you can see, you're already creeping up there close to 300,000. So it's not 21% that's in. So there's fewer votes outstanding here. You can see Charlie Crist, though, still an opportunity to make it up. And again, you look like in Miami-Dade, another opportunity here for Charlie Crist to make up ground. He's tracking at 57%. This is another one, says 45%, fewer votes. So that's what he's got to do. He has got to rack up the score in these 3 counties right now where there's still a significant number of votes out and somehow try to make up that 125,000 vote gap.
Being able to go county by county explains everything you need to know about how you can get that close to an overall statewide number and still not be able to call it. We do have one other race that I want to take a look at right now in the state of Arkansas. I'm not sure if we've got a board here on this one. Do we? Yes, good. The Arkansas, this is a fascinating sort of sleeper issue. In Arkansas, one of the things that was on the ballot this year was increasing the minimum wage. Arkansas, a red state, the Arkansas Republican legislature was not going to vote for an increase in the minimum wage, but they put it directly to the voters, and boy, did voters like this idea. Look at that, a 2-to-1 margin, 66% for, and raising the minimum wage in Arkansas passes not by an act of the legislature, but instead by a direct vote of the people of Arkansas. There have been 11 times now. There's been 11 times now that the minimum wage has been on the ballot since 2010, in which we've got a result. There's 3 more we're waiting on tonight. All 11 times since 2010 when it has been on the ballot, it has passed, and it always passes by huge margins.